Welcome back to Paranightmares, where the night whispers and we listen. If creepy tales and unsettling shadows are your kind of lullaby, you're in the right place. Before we descend into tonight's darkness, hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're from and what time you're watching. After you finish the video, let us know which part made your skin crawl most. I'm watching, and I read everyone. The fluorescent hum of the Walmart Supercenter on the outskirts of Blackwood, Nebraska, was usually a soothing, almost hypnotic drone for Mark, a night stalker who'd seen it all in his 5 years on the graveyard shift. From rogue shopping carts forming impromptu barricades to customers inexplicably napping in display beds, he thought he was immune to surprises. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared him for the events that unfolded in Aisle 7, a desolate canyon of paper products and cleaning supplies, one frigid Tuesday night. It began subtly, as most true horrors do, a persistent, almost imperceptible whisper. Mark, pushing a pallet jack loaded with toilet paper, initially dismissed it as the creaks and groans of the massive building settling, or perhaps the distant murmur of the HVAC system. The store was virtually empty save for the skeleton crew of night stalkers and a lone, elderly security guard named Arthur, who was usually more interested in his crosswords than patrolling. The whispers, however, grew. They weren't distinct words, more like a collective, breathy sigh, a chorus of hushed laments that seemed to emanate from the very shelves themselves. Mark paused, his hand gripping the cold metal of the pallet jack. The hairs on his arms stood on end. He glanced down the long, empty aisle. Nothing. Just rows upon rows of packaged products, sterile and inanimate. He shook his head, attributing it to sleep deprivation. He'd pulled too many doubles lately. He continued his work, trying to focus on the monotonous task of stacking rolls, but the whispers intensified, wrapping around him like an invisible shroud. This time, he could almost make out fragments, disjointed syllables that hinted at names, dates, and desperate pleas. Eleanor gone. 1998. Lost forever. Help me. A chill, far colder than the store's controlled climate, permeated the aisle. Mark's breath plumed in front of him. He looked around wildly. The emergency exit door at the end of the aisle, usually sealed shut, was ajar, a sliver of inky blackness visible beyond it. A faint, sickeningly sweet odor wafted in, something like decaying flowers mixed with stale blood. His flashlight, usually dependable, flickered wildly, casting dancing shadows that made the towering stacks of paper towels seem to writhe. Mark's heart hammered against his ribs. He wasn't a superstitious man, but the sheer oppressiveness of the atmosphere was undeniable. It felt haunted. He slowly, cautiously, walked towards the half-open door. As he drew closer, the whispers coalesced into a cacophony of anguished cries. He could almost discern distinct voices now, pleading, weeping, cursing. They seemed to come from inside the storage room beyond the door, a place usually reserved for extra pallets and forgotten inventory. He hesitated, his hand hovering over the cold metal of the door handle. Common sense screamed at him to turn back, to ignore it, to pretend he hadn't heard anything. But a morbid curiosity, a primal urge to understand, compelled him forward. He pushed the door open wider, the hinges groaning in protest, a sound swallowed by the chorus of despair. The storage room was dark, even darker than the main store, as if light itself recoiled from the space. The sickly sweet smell was overpowering now, cloying and metallic. Mark clicked his flashlight on, its beam cutting through the oppressive gloom. What he saw made his stomach clench. The room wasn't empty. It was filled, not with pallets of goods, but with figures, silhouettes, indistinct and shimmering, like heat haze off asphalt. They seemed to float just above the concrete floor, their forms contorted, their spectral faces turned towards him, their mouths agape in silent screams. They were translucent, almost invisible, yet undeniably there, their collective sorrow pressing down on him. Among them, he recognized glimpses of familiar objects, a worn shopping basket, a forgotten child's toy, a single, bloodied work boot. These weren't just apparitions, they were residual imprints, Echoes of lives once lived within these very walls, lives that had, perhaps, ended here. Suddenly, a distinct figure emerged from the swirling mass of specters. Taller than the others, its form clearer, more defined. It was a woman, her hair disheveled, her face a mask of profound agony. Her eyes, or where her eyes should have been, were hollow pits of despair. She wore a tattered, old-fashioned blue vest, a Walmart uniform, but one from decades past. She slowly, painstakingly, raised a spectral arm, her fingers, long and skeletal, pointing towards something in the corner of the room. Mark's flashlight followed her gesture. There, partially obscured by shadow, was a small, dusty ventilation grate, and beneath it a dark, viscous stain that seemed to seep into the concrete. The sweet, metallic smell was strongest there. As he stared, transfixed, the woman's mouth opened, and a single, guttural word escaped. No longer a whisper, but a raw, agonizing shriek that tore through the air. Fire. The word echoed, reverberating through the storage room, and the other spectral figures seemed to convulse, their whispers intensifying into a deafening roar of agony. The air grew impossibly cold, and the smell of decay sharpened, thick and suffocating. Mark stumbled backward, gasping for air, the flashlight falling from his trembling hand and clattering to the floor. The light beam spun wildly, illuminating the horror show in chaotic flashes. He scrambled out of the room, slamming the door shut behind him. The sound of splintering was almost lost in the wailing that now emanated from within. He ran. He didn't know where he was going, just away. Away from aisle 7, away from the storage room, away from the trapped souls. He burst into the employee break room, panting, his chest heaving. Arthur, the security guard, looked up from his crossword, his bifocals perched on his nose. "Everything all right, Mark? You look like you've seen a ghost." Arthur chuckled, oblivious. Mark could only shake his head, pointing a trembling finger vaguely in the direction of aisle 7. "The bakery of the fire," he stammered, remembering a hushed rumor he'd heard years ago, a tragedy from the store's early days. A fire, a bakery explosion, a night shift worker trapped inside. A story quickly swept under the rug, deemed bad for business. Arthur's smile faltered. He slowly put down his pen, his eyes losing their usual jovial sparkle, replaced by a deep, weary understanding. "Ah, so you finally met Eleanor," he said, his voice softer, devoid of its usual gruffness. "She's still looking for her family. Always drawn to that particular vent. Something about the air currents, I reckon." Mark stared at him, horrified. You know." Arthur sighed, rubbing his temples. "This building, it's old, Mark. Built on what used to be a small factory, then a distribution center. And before that, well, let's just say this ground has seen its share of heartache. Eleanor was just the most vocal. Others passed through. Lost souls, tied to the products, the places, the moments of their demise. This place, it absorbs things, emotions, memories, and sometimes it gives them back." Mark never looked at aisle 7 the same way again. Every creak, every gust of cold air, every unidentifiable whisper sent shivers down his spine. He started wearing headphones, blasting music to drown out the spectral chorus. But even then, he swore he could feel their presence, the heavy weight of their collective sorrow. He often saw customers linger in aisle 7, a strange, vacant look in their eyes, as if listening to something only he and Arthur could truly hear. And sometimes, just sometimes, he'd see a flicker of movement in the reflection of a polished floor tile, a translucent hand reaching out, forever trapped in the never-ending graveyard shift of Walmart's aisle 7. He eventually quit, unable to bear the weight of the store's spectral inhabitants, the whispers of the lost clinging to his sanity. He couldn't shake the feeling that a piece of him, too, was left behind in that haunted aisle, forever marked by the ghosts of Walmart past. The memory of the woman Eleanor forever haunted his dreams, her piercing shriek of fire, a constant echo in the quiet moments of his waking life. He often wondered what secrets Walmart truly held, what tragedies its mundane aisles had witnessed, and how many other souls remained trapped within its brightly lit, yet chillingly dark depths. The sounds of everyday commerce, the cheerful announcements over the PA system, all became a thin veneer over a profound, unsettling silence, a silence that carried the echoes of endless suffering. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that some places, even those designed for convenience and consumerism, were nothing more than elaborate tombs, their foundations steeped in forgotten pain, their very air thick with the residue of unspeakable horrors. The graveyard shift at Aisle 7 wasn't just a job. It was an unending vigil in a place where the dead never truly rested. Liam hated the sporting goods section of his Walmart. It wasn't the smell of new leather or the glint of fishing lures. It was her, the woman, always there, perched on a camping stool, perpetually examining a rusty, antique fishing reel. She was a fixture, as much a part of the aisle as the hunting rifles locked behind glass. She wore the same faded floral dress, stained with what looked suspiciously like motor oil, and a wide-brimmed straw hat that shadowed her face. Her movements were slow, deliberate, almost agonizingly so. She'd pick up the reel, turn it over in her gnarled hands, peer at it intently, then set it back down. Every day, for months. Liam, a fresh-faced college student working part-time, first noticed her a week into his job. He tried to help. "Can I assist you with that, ma'am?" he'd offered, his voice bright and eager. She hadn't looked up. Just a low, guttural growl that seemed to vibrate through the very floor. He'd learned quickly to leave her alone. Other employees, grizzled veterans of retail, simply shrugged when asked. "Oh, her? Just the fishing lady. Been here forever. Don't mind her." But Liam did mind her. The way her eyes, when they occasionally flickered up from the reel, seemed to hold an ancient, bottomless sadness. The faint, sweet smell of formaldehyde that clung to her, a smell that intensified when she moved, and the fact that she never, ever bought anything. She just was. One night, during an unexpected late closing due to inventory, Liam was the last one left in sporting goods. The usual cacophony of the store had died down, replaced by an eerie quiet. The fluorescent lights hummed louder in the silence. He was finishing up a display of baseball bats when he saw her, the fishing lady, still there, on her stool, her back to him, her shoulders slumped. A strange compulsion seized him. He slowly, quietly, walked towards her, his heart thumping an uneasy rhythm against his ribs. He stood behind her for a long moment, the scent of formaldehyde thick in the air. "Ma'am," he whispered, his voice barely audible. She didn't move, but the fishing reel, previously still in her hands, began to spin. Slowly at first, then faster, its rusty gears grinding out a chilling, high-pitched whine that grated on Liam's nerves. The sound grew in intensity, a mechanical scream that echoed through the deserted aisle. Then, with a creak that sounded suspiciously like old bones, she began to turn. Her movement was agonizingly slow, her neck seemingly stiff, resistant. As her face came into view, Liam stifled a scream. Her face wasn't human. Not anymore. It was a desiccated husk, leathery and drawn tight over prominent cheekbones. Her eyes were sunken hollows, and her mouth, a gaping maw, stretched impossibly wide. What little hair she had left was brittle and white, clinging to her skull like cobwebs. The scent of formaldehyde was overwhelming now, burning his nostrils. And then she spoke. Her voice was not the growl he was used to, but a dry, raspy whisper, like sand sifting through paper. It was the sound of something long dead, struggling to speak. "He promised to take me fishing." The words were agonizingly slow, each syllable drawn out, filled with an ancient, unbearable sorrow. As she spoke, the fishing reel in her hand spun even faster, a blur of rust and metal. Liam stumbled backward, tripping over a display of golf clubs, sending them clattering across the floor. The sound, normally loud, was swallowed by the high-pitched shriek of the spinning reel. He scrambled to his feet, terror lending him a strength he didn't know he possessed. He ran. He didn't look back. He burst out of sporting goods, not caring about the mess he'd made. He ran past frozen food, past electronics, past the deserted checkout lanes, his own ragged breathing the only sound in his ears. He fumbled with the emergency exit door, finally bursting out into the cool night air, gasping for breath. He never went back to Walmart. He told his parents he'd found a better job, but the truth was the image of the fishing lady, her skeletal face, and that agonizing whisper was burned into his mind. He'd often wonder if she was still there, perched on her stool, perpetually waiting for a fishing trip that would never come, her rusty reel still grinding out its mournful song. He later heard rumors, whispers from old townsfolk, about a woman who had died alone in her car in the Walmart parking lot decades ago, waiting for her husband to finish his shopping so they could go on their long-planned fishing trip. Her husband, it was said, had forgotten her, lost in the labyrinthine aisles, and only remembered hours later, by which time it was too late. The Walmart, built over the very spot where her car had been, had, perhaps, absorbed her lingering sorrow, her endless vigil for a promise broken by forgetfulness and the vast, uncaring expanse of consumerism. The image of the perpetual customer, eternally waiting in the brightly lit purgatory of the sporting goods aisle, became a chilling testament to the lingering echoes of unfulfilled promises and tragic ends within the seemingly mundane walls of a retail giant. Liam often found himself checking the obituaries, searching for a name, a date, a confirmation of the spectral woman he encountered. The incident had instilled in him a profound unease about places that seemingly held no history, revealing instead a hidden layer of forgotten sorrow. He realized that the hum of the fluorescent lights, the cheerful jingles over the intercom, were merely a flimsy curtain, barely concealing the profound grief and loneliness that could permeate even the most commercial of spaces. The fishing lady was not just a ghost. She was a chilling reminder that some promises, once broken, continue to haunt, even in the most unexpected of places. Liam hated the sporting goods section of his Walmart. It wasn't the smell of new leather or the glint of fishing lures. It was her, the woman, always there, perched on a camping stool, perpetually examining a rusty, antique fishing reel. She was a fixture, as much a part of the aisle as the hunting rifles locked behind glass. She wore the same faded floral dress, stained with what looked suspiciously like motor oil, and a wide-brimmed straw hat that shadowed her face. Her movements were slow, deliberate, almost agonizingly so. She'd pick up the reel, turn it over in her gnarled hands, peer at it intently, then set it back down. Every day, for months. Liam, a fresh-faced college student working part-time, first noticed her a week into his job. He tried to help. "Can I assist you with that, ma'am?" he'd offered, his voice bright and eager. She hadn't looked up. Just a low, guttural growl that seemed to vibrate through the very floor. He'd learned quickly to leave her alone. Other employees, grizzled veterans of retail, simply shrugged when asked. "Oh, her? Just the fishing lady. Been here forever. Don't mind her." But Liam did mind her. The way her eyes, when they occasionally flickered up from the reel, seemed to hold an ancient, bottomless sadness. The faint, sweet smell of formaldehyde that clung to her, a smell that intensified when she moved, and the fact that she never, ever bought anything. She just was. One night, during an unexpected late closing due to inventory, Liam was the last one left in sporting goods. The usual cacophony of the store had died down, replaced by an eerie quiet. The fluorescent lights hummed louder in the silence. He was finishing up a display of baseball bats when he saw her, the fishing lady, still there, on her stool, her back to him, her shoulders slumped. A strange compulsion seized him. He slowly, quietly, walked towards her, his heart thumping an uneasy rhythm against his ribs. He stood behind her for a long moment, the scent of formaldehyde thick in the air. "Ma'am," he whispered, his voice barely audible. She didn't move, but the fishing reel, previously still in her hands, began to spin, slowly at first, then faster, its rusty gears grinding out a chilling, high-pitched whine that grated on Liam's nerves. The sound grew in intensity, a mechanical scream that echoed through the deserted aisle. Then, with a creak that sounded suspiciously like old bones, she began to turn. Her movement was agonizingly slow, her neck seemingly stiff, resistant. As her face came into view, Liam stifled a scream. Her face wasn't human. Not anymore. It was a desiccated husk, leathery and drawn tight over prominent cheekbones. Her eyes were sunken hollows, and her mouth, a gaping maw, stretched impossibly wide. What little hair she had left was brittle and white, clinging to her skull like cobwebs. The scent of formaldehyde was overwhelming now, burning his nostrils. And then she spoke. Her voice was not the growl he was used to, but a dry, raspy whisper, like sand sifting through paper. It was the sound of something long dead, struggling to speak. He promised to take me fishing. The words were agonizingly slow, each syllable drawn out, filled with an ancient, unbearable sorrow. As she spoke, the fishing reel in her hand spun even faster, a blur of rust and metal. Liam stumbled backward, tripping over a display of golf clubs, sending them clattering across the floor. The sound, normally loud, was swallowed by the high-pitched shriek of the spinning reel. He scrambled to his feet, terror lending him a strength he didn't know he possessed. He ran. He didn't look back. He burst out of sporting goods, not caring about the mess he'd made. He ran past frozen food, past electronics, past the deserted checkout lanes, his own ragged breathing the only sound in his ears. He fumbled with the emergency exit door, finally bursting out into the cool night air, gasping for breath. He never went back to Walmart. He told his parents he'd found a better job, but the truth was, the image of the fishing lady, her skeletal face, and that agonizing whisper was burned into his mind. He'd often wonder if she was still there, perched on her stool, perpetually waiting for a fishing trip that would never come, her rusty reel still grinding out its mournful song. He later heard rumors, whispers from old townsfolk, about a woman who had died alone in her car in the Walmart parking lot decades ago, waiting for her husband to finish his shopping so they could go on their long-planned fishing trip. Her husband, it was said, had forgotten her, lost in the labyrinthine aisles, and only remembered hours later, by which time it was too late. The Walmart, built over the very spot where her car had been, had, perhaps, absorbed her lingering sorrow, her endless vigil for a promise broken by forgetfulness and the vast, uncaring expanse of consumerism. The image of the perpetual customer, eternally waiting in the brightly lit purgatory of the sporting goods aisle, became a chilling testament to the lingering echoes of unfulfilled promises and tragic ends within the seemingly mundane walls of a retail giant. Liam often found himself checking the obituaries, searching for a name, a date, a confirmation of the spectral woman he encountered. The incident had instilled in him a profound unease about places that seemingly held no history, revealing instead a hidden layer of forgotten sorrow. He realized that the hum of the fluorescent lights, the cheerful jingles over the intercom, were merely a flimsy curtain, barely concealing the profound grief and loneliness that could permeate even the most commercial of spaces. The fishing lady was not just a ghost. She was a chilling reminder that some promises, once broken, continue to haunt, even in the most unexpected of places. The men's restroom aisle, a dark, perpetually damp stretch of concrete and linoleum, was where Kevin's shift became a nightmare. As an overnight maintenance worker at Walmart, he was used to cleaning up unspeakable messes, but the recurring phenomenon in the men's restroom went beyond mere human filth. It was biological and terrifying. It started a month ago. A peculiar smell, not quite sewage, not quite decomposition, but a sickening combination of both, emanating from the last stall. No matter how much he cleaned, how many industrial-strength deodorizers he sprayed, the odor persisted, clinging to the very air. Then came the sounds. A low, guttural gurgle, like a swamp monster rising from the muck, followed by a wet, slapping sound. Kevin, armed with his mop and bucket, would freeze, his heart pounding. He checked the stalls, one by one, expecting to find a homeless man, a prankster. But every stall was empty, pristine save for the lingering, putrid smell. One night, the sounds were more distinct. A heavy, rhythmic breathing, punctuated by the unmistakable squelching of bare feet on wet tile. Kevin, despite every fiber of his being screaming at him to run, slowly pushed open the last stall door. What he saw wasn't a man. Not entirely. A figure, hunched over the toilet. Its back to him was a sickly greenish-brown. Its skin seemed to ripple and sag, like ancient, waterlogged parchment. Patches of dark, matted hair clung to its head and back, slick with moisture. A cloud of thick, greenish vapor, smelling of putrid swamp gas, rose from its form. The creature's hands, disproportionately large and webbed, were plunging into the toilet bowl, swirling the murky water with a disturbing intensity. A faint, glowing aura of sickly green light seemed to emanate from the toilet itself, casting grotesque shadows on the walls. Kevin gasped, a choked sound that seemed to shatter the stillness. The creature froze. Slowly, agonizingly, its head turned. Its face was a nightmare. Eyes, large and bulbous, glowed with an eerie, internal light, reflecting the sickly green of the toilet. Its nose was a mere slit, and its mouth, a wide, gaping maw, was filled with rows of jagged, broken teeth, some coated in a dark, viscous slime. Its skin was mottled, covered in what looked like festering sores and fungal growths. A guttural, what groan escaped its throat, a sound of profound pain and a hint of something ancient and hungry. The creature slowly stood, its immense form filling the stall. It wasn't just a man. It was something born of decay, a manifestation of the restroom's accumulated filth and forgotten horrors. It was the Methane Man. The stench intensified, assaulting Kevin's senses, making him gag. The creature took a step forward, its webbed feet squelching on the wet floor. Each step left a faint, green, phosphorescent footprint. Kevin didn't wait. He dropped his mop and bucket with a clatter and bolted. He ran through the deserted store, past the silent aisles of merchandise, the flickering fluorescent lights seeming to mock his terror. He didn't stop until he burst into the security office, gasping, breathless, his face pale with horror. Arthur, the security guard, looked up, a familiar, resigned expression on his face. Methane Man, been a while since he made a full appearance. Usually just a smell. Kevin stared at him aghast. You know about it. Arthur sighed, shaking his head. This store, Kevin, was built on top of an old landfill, and before that a marsh. All that compressed organic matter, all that waste sometimes, it finds a way to manifest. The gas, the decay, it takes a physical form, especially in places where things are allowed to fester, like that restroom. Kevin quit that night. He couldn't bear the thought of returning to that restroom, of the Methane Man waiting in the last stall, endlessly churning the murky depths of the toilet, a grotesque guardian of the store's forgotten, toxic past. He often wondered if the store, with its pristine facade and brightly lit aisles, was merely a thin veil over a festering wound in the earth, a place where the refuse of humanity came to life in the most horrifying ways imaginable. The Methane Man was not just a creature of myth. He was a living, breathing testament to the hidden, putrid secrets buried beneath the consumerist dream. He imagined the stench, the green glow, the squelching footsteps, forever imprinted on his mind. The experience transformed the mundane act of cleaning into a terrifying dance with the grotesque, a confrontation with the very essence of decay. He couldn't help but see the Methane Man in every discarded wrapper, every overflowing trash can, a chilling reminder that humanity's waste, when left unaddressed, could take on a terrifying life of its own. The lost and found at Walmart wasn't just a repository of forgotten items. For Janice, the graveyard shift supervisor, it was a purgatory of echoes. Customers would occasionally ask about its contents, a forlorn hope in their eyes for a misplaced wallet or a child's cherished toy. But what truly haunted Janice were the whispers that emanated from within its cramped, dust-laden shelves. It started innocently, a faint rustling, like someone turning pages when no one was near. Then soft murmurs, indistinct and fleeting, as if multiple conversations were happening just beyond the threshold of hearing. Janice, a pragmatic woman of 50, brushed it off as the store settling, or perhaps the nearby break room television bleeding sound. But the whispers grew clearer, more persistent. They weren't just random sounds. They were fragments of conversations, Snippets of arguments, laughter, and cries. All familiar, yet utterly out of place. They were the echoes of the items themselves, their past owners' emotions clinging to them like static. One night, while organizing a bin of forgotten umbrellas, she heard a child's desperate sob, clear as day, coming from a small, worn teddy bear. "Mama, where are you?" Janice froze, her blood running cold. She picked up the bear, its faux fur surprisingly warm against her fingers. The sobs continued, muffled now, but undeniably present, emanating from the toy. She put the bear down, her hands trembling. She suddenly understood. The lost and found wasn't just holding objects. It was holding fragments of lives, echoes of emotions, memories imprinted onto the forgotten possessions. And sometimes, those imprints became strong enough to manifest. The next night, the whispers became a chorus, a cacophony of voices, all speaking at once, pleading, arguing, laughing, weeping. She heard a man's angry shout from a lost phone. "You can't leave me." A woman's gentle lullaby from a discarded baby blanket. "Sleep, my sweet." The frantic ringing of a bell from a child's lost bike helmet. "Help." The air in the lost and found grew heavy, thick with the weight of accumulated emotions. The shelves seemed to pulse with an unseen energy, and the items themselves, once mundane, now seemed to thrum with a spectral life. Janice found herself drawn to a dusty, old purse. As she reached for it, a chillingly clear voice, a woman's voice, whispered directly into her ear. A breathy, desperate plea. "Find my daughter. She's in aisle 5. She's waiting." Janice gasped, stumbling backward. She knew that voice. It was the voice of a woman who had gone missing from the store weeks ago, a case the police had quietly closed as a runaway. Her purse had been found in the parking lot, but if she was in aisle 5 waiting, driven by a strange, unsettling urge, Janice grabbed her flashlight and ventured into the deserted store. The aisle stretched before her, dark and cavernous. She walked towards aisle 5, her heart hammering. The whispers from the lost and found seemed to follow her, a phantom chorus urging her onward. Aisle 5 was the grocery section, usually a hive of activity. Now it was silent, save for the distant hum of refrigerators. She scanned the shelves, her flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. Nothing. Then she saw it, a single small red shoe, tucked away beneath a display of cereal boxes. It was a child's shoe, clearly well worn, and from within it, a faint, almost imperceptible sound, a child's soft weeping. Janice knelt, her hand trembling as she reached for the shoe. As her fingers brushed the worn leather, the weeping intensified, and a faint, spectral image flickered into view above the shoe. A small girl, no older than 5, her face streaked with tears, looking around frantically, calling for her mother. The image was transparent, fleeting, but undeniably there. The whispers from the lost and found surged, a wave of desperate concern. Her mother, she came looking. She never found her. Lost forever. Janice understood the horrific truth. The woman in the purse, the missing woman, had been looking for her daughter in aisle 5. And the daughter, perhaps lost or hidden, had been here too, both lost in the sprawling labyrinth of Walmart, never to find each other again. The items in the lost and found weren't just lost. They were markers of tragic separations, of desperate searches that had ended in futility. She returned to the lost and found, the small red shoe clutched in her hand. The whispers were calmer now, a mournful hum of acceptance. She placed the shoe gently next to the old purse, a silent reunion for the spectral mother and child. Janice resigned shortly after. She couldn't bear the weight of the stories, clinging to the forgotten items, the profound sadness that permeated the lost and found. She knew that some things, once lost, were never truly found, their echoes forever trapped within the walls of Walmart, a chilling monument to untold tragedies. The whispering walls of the lost and found were not just a spooky phenomenon. They were a profound testament to the unquantifiable human cost hidden within the mundane landscape of consumerism, a place where the past never truly faded, and every forgotten item held a heartbreaking story. The first time Michael, a newly hired night stalker, saw him, he thought it was just another eccentric customer. The Midnight Wanderer, as he came to be known, was an elderly man, impossibly gaunt, with wild, unkempt white hair and a vacant stare. He wore a threadbare suit that seemed several sizes too large, and he perpetually pushed an empty shopping cart. He would appear in random aisles, always at the deepest, darkest hours of the night, long after the last customers had left. He never spoke, never acknowledged Michael or the other few night shift employees. He just pushed his cart, endlessly, silently, weaving through the deserted aisles, his footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. Michael, initially unnerved, tried to interact. "Can I help you find anything, sir?" he'd asked one night, approaching the man in the cereal aisle. The wanderer stopped, slowly turning his head. His eyes, though vacant, seemed to hold a flicker of something ancient, something profoundly lost. He raised a trembling hand, pointing a gnarled finger down the seemingly endless expanse of the aisle. A low, raspy sigh escaped his lips, a sound devoid of words, yet laden with an unbearable weariness. Michael felt a chill that had nothing to do with the store's air conditioning. The man wasn't just shopping, he was searching. For what, Michael couldn't fathom. The other night stalkers had their own theories. Just a poor old fellow who got confused, one would say. Probably wandered in and got locked inside. But Michael knew it was more than that. The wanderer moved with an unnerving purpose, a desperate, unending quest that seemed to transcend the physical boundaries of the store. One particular night, the store's electricity flickered violently during a storm, plunging parts of the building into complete darkness. Michael, navigating by the dim glow of his phone, found himself in the toys section. The emergency lights, usually quick to activate, were slow to respond. In the pitch black, he heard it, the familiar, rhythmic squeak of the wanderer's cartwheels. And then a new sound, a faint, mournful humming. It was a lullaby, hauntingly familiar, yet distorted, as if sung through a thick veil of static. Michael's phone beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the wanderer. He was standing in the middle of a display of children's bikes, his head bowed, his empty cart positioned as if waiting for a passenger. The humming grew louder, and from the empty cart, a faint, translucent glow began to emanate, shimmering like heat off asphalt. As Michael watched, horrified, the glow intensified, and a shadowy form began to coalesce within the cart. It was small and distinct, yet undeniably the shape of a child. It seemed to shiver and weep, its tiny, spectral hand reaching out towards the wanderer. The old man slowly reached into the empty cart, his hand passing directly through the shimmering form. He then began to rock his arms, as if cradling an infant, his face contorted in a silent, heart-wrenching agony. The lullaby, the ghostly humming, grew stronger, and the child's spectral form seemed to lean into the old man's phantom embrace. Michael realized the horrific truth. The wanderer wasn't just lost. He was eternally searching for a lost child, perhaps a grandchild, who had somehow become trapped within the endless confines of Walmart's labyrinthine aisles. The store and its vast, indifferent sprawl had become a purgatory for the man and his lost loved one. The lights flickered back on, bathing the toy section in a harsh, artificial glow. The wanderer was gone. The empty cart remained, but the faint, shimmering glow and the ghostly form of the child had vanished. Only the lingering, profound sadness remained, a heavy pall in the air. Michael never saw the wanderer again after that night, but he often felt his presence, a chilling sense of unending grief that permeated the silent aisles. He would occasionally hear the faint, distant squeak of cart wheels or the ghost of a child's mournful hum, and he would know that somewhere, in the endless expanse of Walmart, the midnight wanderer was still pushing his empty cart, forever searching for a child lost in the consumerist maze, a chilling reminder that some losses within these vast, impersonal spaces could become eternal. The endless aisles of the midnight wanderer were not just a place for shopping. They were a vast, unsettling monument to an unending search for what was irrevocably gone. Michael often wondered how many other untold tragedies and endless searches were playing out in the unseen corners of the store. hidden beneath the bright lights and the cheerful jingles. He realized that the sheer scale of Walmart, its almost infinite array of products, masked a chilling truth. For some, it was not a place of convenience, but a prison of eternal grief, where the boundaries between life and death blurred, and the lost remained forever trapped. Emily, college student working the graveyard shift at Walmart self-checkout, was no stranger to the bizarre. She'd seen customers argue with machines, attempt to scam themselves, and even conduct full-blown concerts with their groceries. But the phantom shopper of self-checkout 5 was a different kind of strange. It began with a subtle anomaly. The machine, number 5, would occasionally register a transaction when no one was using it. A faint beep-beep of items being scanned, followed by the metallic clink of coins being dispensed, even when the coin slot was empty. Emily would check the transaction log. Always the same. Transaction complete. Total $0. She initially suspected a glitch, or perhaps a mischievous coworker playing a prank. But the incidents grew in frequency, and the feeling of being watched, particularly by an unseen presence at Machine 5, became undeniable. One night, the store was eerily quiet. A thick fog had rolled in, shrouding the building in a ghostly mist, and only a handful of customers remained, mostly in the electronics section. Emily was wiping down the self-checkout screens when she saw it, a faint, translucent ripple in the air above self-checkout 5. It was like heat rising from asphalt, but it had a faint, almost human outline. A woman, indistinct and shimmering, seemed to stand before the machine, her form wavering like a poorly tuned television signal. Emily froze, her heart leaping into her throat. She gripped her cleaning rag, her knuckles white. The phantom figure slowly raised a shimmering hand, its fingers passing through the air, and a distinct beep-beep emanated from Machine 5. Emily heard the phantom rustle of a plastic bag, and then the clink of invisible coins. The screen flashed. Transaction complete. Total $0. The phantom shopper was conducting a transaction, an empty, ghostly transaction. A wave of profound sadness washed over Emily, emanating from the shimmering figure. It was a feeling of loss, of yearning for something that could never be regained. She saw a fleeting image in her mind's eye, a quick flash of a woman, older, tired, meticulously scanning groceries, a faint smile on her face as she looked at a child in a shopping cart. Then, the phantom figure seemed to sigh, a sound like rustling leaves, and slowly, agonizingly, it turned its head. Its face was indistinct, a blur of shimmering light, but its eyes, or where its eyes should have been, were hollow pools of despair. They seemed to look directly at Emily, conveying an ancient, unbearable sorrow. A whisper, faint and breathy, reached her ears, not from the figure itself, but from the machine, number 5, its speakers seemingly channeling the spectral voice. "I just wanted one more trip." Emily backed away slowly, her eyes fixed on the shimmering figure. The air grew impossibly cold around self-checkout 5, and the smell of ozone, like after a lightning strike, filled her nostrils. The phantom figure slowly dissipated, leaving behind only the lingering scent and the chilling silence. She reported the incident to her manager, who, like always, dismissed it as a hallucination, offering her extra time off. But Emily knew. She knew the woman. She had seen her before, regular, a sweet old lady who always used self-checkout 5, always meticulously scanning her few items, always chatting with her young grandson, who would sit patiently in the cart. She had died suddenly, a few weeks prior, in the parking lot, just after leaving the store. The phantom shopper of self-checkout 5 was not a glitch. It was a ghost, a soul trapped in the mundane ritual of consumerism, forever longing for one more trip, one more moment of normalcy in the world she had left behind. Emily resigned shortly after, unable to bear the thought of working alongside the spectral presence, forever performing phantom transactions in the aisles of the lost. She often wondered if the relentless pursuit of convenience had inadvertently created a new kind of haunting, where the echoes of daily routines became eternal loops for the departed. The image of the shimmering figure, forever engaged in a phantom transaction, became a chilling testament to the lingering attachments that tethered souls to the most ordinary of places. The phantom shopper of Self-Checkout 5 wasn't just a ghost story. It was a profound, unsettling meditation on the lingering echoes of everyday life and the strange, haunting beauty of a final, unfulfilled desire. Marcus, a forklift operator on the night shift, considered the warehouse section of Walmart his domain, a sprawling, dimly lit expanse of towering shelves and heavy machinery. It was far removed from the bright, bustling retail floor. He liked the solitude, the rhythmic clatter of his forklift, the sense of being a small cog in a massive, efficient machine. But recently, the solitude had become unsettling. It started with faint whispers emanating from a large, industrial-sized roll-up doors that led to the outside receiving bays. Initially, he dismissed it as wind whistling through cracks, or the distant murmur of traffic on the highway. But the whispers grew distinct, forming a chilling, almost rhythmic cadence, like a chant. "Open, open," they seemed to say, over and over, their voices a chilling chorus of unseen entities. Marcus would pause his forklift, the hydraulic hiss suddenly loud in the silence. He'd stare at the imposing metal doors, usually secured with heavy chains and padlocks. They remained stubbornly shut. Yet, the whispers continued, growing in intensity, pressing in on him, urging him to release whatever lay beyond. One particularly cold night, the air in the warehouse dropped several degrees, and a pervasive, sickly sweet smell, like rotten meat mixed with something metallic, began to seep from beneath the warehouse doors. The whispers intensified, becoming frantic, guttural pleas. "Release us!" they shrieked, their collective voice rising in a desperate crescendo. Marcus felt an inexplicable terror seize him. He knew, with a primal certainty, that whatever was outside those doors, whatever was whispering and pleading, was not human. It was something ancient, something hungry, something that had been waiting. Driven by a morbid curiosity he immediately regretted, Marcus slowly drove his forklift towards the doors. The smell grew stronger, assaulting his senses, making him gag. The whispers were deafening now, a frantic chorus of unseen hands clawing at the metal. As he drew closer, he saw it, a faint, greenish light pulsating from beneath the doors, seeping through the cracks. It was a sickly, unnatural glow that seemed to writhe and undulate. And then he saw shapes, dark, indistinct forms pressing against the metal from the other side, their outlines vaguely human, yet disturbingly malformed. They seemed to stretch and contort, desperate to break free. He stopped the forklift, just inches from the doors. The whispers became individual voices, distinct and horrifying. He heard agonizing moans, desperate pleas for release, and chilling, guttural snarls. He caught glimpses of faces, pressed against the cracks, eyes glowing with malevolent hunger. Suddenly, a violent shudder ripped through the warehouse doors. The metal groaned and buckled, and a faint, thin stream of dark, viscous liquid began to ooze from the bottom, smelling intensely of decay and something chemical. Marcus screamed, a raw, primal sound of terror. He slammed the forklift into reverse, speeding away from the doors, his heart hammering against his ribs. He didn't stop until he was in the brightly lit break room, gasping for air, his body trembling uncontrollably. Arthur, the security guard, looked at him with a knowing, weary expression. "They're getting restless again, aren't they?" he said, his voice quiet. Marcus stared at him, unable to speak. "This land," Arthur continued, "used to be a cattle rendering plant decades ago. All the waste, all the unmentionable things buried beneath us. And before that, a mass grave from the old pioneer days, a sickness that wiped out a whole settlement. The ground here, it remembers. And sometimes, the earth, it wants to give back what it's taken. Those doors, they're holding back a lot more than just inventory." Marcus quit immediately. He couldn't bear the thought of returning to the warehouse, of the ancient horrors stirring beneath the concrete, forever whispering from behind the metal doors, waiting for release. He knew that some places, no matter how modern and sanitized, held secrets deeper and far more terrifying than any human could fathom. The whispers from the warehouse doors were not just a phantom sound. They were the collective cries of the dead, trapped beneath the consumerist empire, forever seeking liberation. He often woke in cold sweats, hearing the phantom whispers, the metallic groan of the doors, and the sickening smell. He couldn't help but imagine the distorted figures pressing against the metal, their eyes glowing with an unholy hunger. The experience left him with a profound unease about the ground beneath his feet, the hidden histories of places, and the chilling realization that even the most mundane locations could be built upon layers of unspeakable suffering, perpetually threatening to erupt. For David, the electronics department at Walmart was his sanctuary, a realm of blinking lights, crisp screens, and the comforting whir of cooling fans. He was the resident expert, the guy who knew every spec, every release date. But then the glitches started. Not just software bugs, but something far more unsettling. It began with minor anomalies. A television displaying static when unplugged. A phone ringing with a phantom caller ID. David, a rational man, attributed it to faulty wiring, electromagnetic interference, until the patterns emerged. The screens in the department would occasionally flicker, not with static, but with fleeting images, blurred faces, impossible landscapes, scenes of mundane domesticity that dissolved as quickly as they appeared. It was like glimpsing another reality, just for a fraction of a second. Then the audio glitches. Speakers would emit garbled voices, distorted whispers, sometimes a child's faint cry, when no audio source was connected. David would frantically check connections, power cycles, but found nothing amiss. One night, during a routine inventory check, he was in the console gaming section. The rows of game systems, usually inert, seemed to hum with a low, unnatural energy. He noticed a single PlayStation 5, its display model usually off, was glowing with a faint blue light. He approached it cautiously. The console's menu screen was active, but it wasn't the usual interface. Instead, a series of cryptic symbols scrolled across the screen, ancient and indecipherable, pulsating with the blue light. And then a single word flashed, superimposed over the symbols. Help. David's blood ran cold. He reached out to turn off the console, but as his fingers neared the power button, the screen flickered violently. The symbol swirled into a vortex of blue light, and then a face materialized. It was a woman's face, contorted in fear, her eyes wide with terror. Her mouth was open in a silent scream, and her image seemed to stretch and distort, as if trapped within the digital confines of the screen. Her eyes, however, seemed to look directly at David, pleading, desperate. From the console speakers, a guttural, choked sound emerged, a combination of a sob and a gurgle, as if someone was drowning. David recoiled, stumbling backward. The image of the woman on the screen began to pixelate, her face dissolving into a mosaic of digital noise. The word help flashed again, then faded, replaced by the scrolling symbols. The blue light intensified, bathing the entire console in an eerie glow. He didn't know what to do. He couldn't turn it off. It was as if the console itself had become possessed, a gateway to something else. Suddenly, a voice, cold and devoid of emotion, emanated from all the speakers in the department, echoing through the cavernous space. Interference detected. Containment protocol initiated. Eliminating anomaly. The blue light on the console pulsed violently, then exploded in a shower of sparks. The screen went black. The air filled with the acrid smell of burned electronics. All the other screens in the department went dark simultaneously, and the comforting hum of cooling fans died. A profound, unsettling silence descended upon the electronics department. David stood there, trembling, staring at the dead console. He was transferred to the overnight receiving department shortly after, a quieter, less technologically advanced section of the store. He never spoke of the incident, fearing he'd be labeled insane, but he often felt a phantom chill when he walked past the electronics department, a lingering sense of a desperate plea trapped within the silent, darkened screens. He knew that the glitch in the matrix of electronics wasn't just a malfunction. It was a terrifying glimpse into a hidden digital world, a place where consciousness could be trapped and eliminated, where the lines between reality and simulation blurred, and the very technology designed to connect us could become a horrifying prison. He had witnessed something beyond human comprehension, a digital haunting that defied logic, and left him with a chilling understanding of the potential darkness lurking within the most advanced systems. For Sarah, the night auditor at Walmart, the silence was the most unsettling part. Not the quiet of a sleeping city, but the vast, oppressive stillness of a massive retail store, stripped bare of its daytime chaos. It was a silence that seemed to hum with an unheard energy, a profound vacuum that sometimes felt like it was pressing in on her. She had always been sensitive to atmosphere, a trait that made her an excellent auditor, noticing the subtle discrepancies. But now, that sensitivity was a curse, because in the dead of night, when the last customers were gone and the few night stalkers were tucked away in their specific sections, Sarah began to hear it, a faint, ethereal humming. It wasn't music, not precisely, but a collective, almost melodic resonance that seemed to emanate from the very air of the store. It would start subtly in one aisle, then spread like an invisible wave, until the entire store was filled with this unearthly, silent choir. It grew in intensity with the hours, reaching its peak just before dawn. It wasn't menacing, not overtly, but deeply unsettling. It was a sound that made her heart ache, a profound, collective sorrow that seemed to resonate with something deep within her own soul. One night, while auditing the seasonal aisle, filled with cheerful, brightly colored holiday decorations, the humming grew impossibly strong. It was so intense it felt almost tangible, a physical pressure against her eardrums. She felt a strange pull, a compelling urge to walk deeper into the aisle. As she moved, she noticed something. The ornaments, the plastic snowmen, the flickering LED lights, they seemed to glow with a faint, internal light, synchronized with the humming. And then she saw figures. Translucent, shimmering forms, indistinct yet unmistakably human, seemed to materialize among the festive displays. They were numerous, a silent congregation, their forms wavering like reflections on water. They stood still, their heads bowed, their spectral hands clasped before them. They were not screaming, not wailing, not even whispering. They were just humming, a silent, sorrowful hum that resonated deep in her bones. Sarah realized with a gasp of horror. This wasn't a choir, it was a vigil, a silent congregation of the lost, trapped within the mundane objects of the store, forever observing the endless cycle of commerce. She looked closer at the figures. Some wore faded clothes, reminiscent of decades past. Others were more recent, their spectral forms still bearing the faint imprint of modern attire. They were the shoppers, the employees, the lives that had passed through these very aisles, leaving behind a lingering imprint of their presence, their emotions, their very essence. As the pre-dawn light began to filter through the skylights, the humming slowly faded. The translucent figures began to shimmer more intensely, then slowly, agonizingly, they dissolved, absorbed back into the very air, leaving behind only the brightly lit, silent aisles and the cheerful, inanimate decorations. Sarah, trembling, returned to her office. She tried to explain it to the morning manager, but her words felt hollow, inadequate to describe the profound, almost spiritual encounter she had witnessed. She resigned the next day. She knew that the silent choir of the overnight aisles wasn't a haunting in the traditional sense. It was a lingering echo of humanity, a collective memory embedded within the very fabric of the building, a testament to the myriad lives that had brushed against these walls, leaving behind fragments of their joy, their sorrow, their very being. She often found herself humming the same ethereal tune, a haunting melody that followed her long after she left Walmart, a constant reminder of the unseen lives that continued their silent vigil in the depths of the night, within the brightly lit, yet chillingly profound, heart of the retail giant. The experience had irrevocably altered her perception of mundane spaces, revealing them as vast repositories of human emotion and memory. She learned that even in the most commercialized environments, the echoes of lives, both ordinary and tragic, persisted, forming an unseen, unheard chorus that forever resonated in the profound stillness of the night.